it had to be close to college years for school to start, and then it was arranged that my grandmother Stangler, with whom I lived in Fingal, would send me to college. And at that time, to be a teacher, you went to school 2 years to receive your standard diploma, and then after you taught school 3 years, you received a lifetime certificate. The long and short of it is that I did go to college for 1 year, and at that time Esther and I roomed together. We didn't stay at a dorm. We stayed in a house, and there were many girls in that home that the owners rented to students to go to college.
Is that place still here? The house?
What?
Is that house still around?
You know, as we drive down Riverside, I always try to find that house. It was on Riverside, and it was a big house. Yeah. But I can't be sure which house it actually is. Mm-hmm. The closest I can get to that house is the Iverson house, and yet I should ask sometime how long Iversons lived in that house, because that's the house I can remember going from Riverside to college. I enjoyed college, and of course I was studying to be a teacher, but after that 1 year, I suppose my grandmother helped other grandchildren, so it wasn't sure that I was to go to college. I missed college a year, I skipped a year, and then my Uncle Robert, of whom I spoke and said went into banking, he was a banker in Jamestown 1 year. Actually, he started banking in the little town of Lucca. Lucca had a bank, and Lucca had a hotel. Lucca had a schoolhouse. Lucca had a post office, and of course the depot with the 2 railroads was very important. I guess Lucca had a town hall. It had 2 churches, and the school was very active. From there, Uncle Robert went to Jamestown, and from Jamestown, there in Jamestown, there was a young girl who had been brought up by the nuns, a very beautiful girl, younger than Uncle Robert, and they married and had 2 children. They moved to Bismarck, and he was with the Bank of North Dakota. But Aunt Catherine was a lady who was beautiful. She was social. She liked to go out, and I think she needed attention. And Uncle Robert was, everything for him was work. He was a workaholic. He was proud of Aunt Catherine. He'd bring her home, and he'd be so happy to have her meet people, but their marriage ended in a separation, and he raised Sylvia and Barbara, the 2 girls. Uncle Robert, at that time, moved from the Bank of North Dakota to the State Mill and Elevator, and was president of it. And he gave me the last year or the second year of education, and so I graduated with my certificate, standard certificate, in 1934. And while I was attending school, I did my practice teaching. The school had trained the teachers right there. I'd run for my classes back to do my teaching, and that was a very busy year for me. I did my practice teaching in the 3rd grade and liked it. I was excited about it. At that time, we had supervisors, and we'd meet and have our lesson plans and for a week ahead. And so right before graduation, I became ill. Actually, I broke out and didn't know what I had. So my parents came to Valley City. I went to a doctor, and lo and behold, it was diagnosed as hives, but I was just full of hives. So my doctor told me I had to go home and stay in bed, and I couldn't. We were writing final exams at that time. The long and short of it is that I had to have conferences to graduate with the instructors, and all was well. I did graduate. I did walk across the stage in the June of 1934. I had at that time I was already applying for positions for teaching.
Did you have any boyfriends in college?
Oh, yes. I had boyfriends. I wouldn't say I wasn't so that I was extremely popular, but I had friends that even from my high school who also went to college that I was friends with. And these same friends were friends of mine in high school. I'm not going to mention names because the names might still be names that you would recognize from families of today, but I did go to college dances, and the surprising part about this is the man I married, my husband, at that time belonged to a dance band, and he played dances even from the time he was in high school in Valley City. But he would play for these dances in the college, and I met him at that time, but that was it. Years went by, and I started teaching, and it wasn't until later that he and I started dating. And well, the long and short of it is I applied for a position in teaching in Lucca, and the idea was that if I could get this position in Lucca in my home school, I would stay home with the folks and drive those 2 miles to school every day, and in that sense I would be a help to my folks because my mother was already having her illness of arthritis, which was so difficult for her in being able to do housework, and even she needed care in seeing doctors, and it was just a great help that I would be home. So when I applied for this position in teaching, I would go out to the farms. Lucca was a farming community, and many of the school board members were farmers. So I'd meet these farmers. Sometimes I'd walk into the barns and they were milking cows. Sometimes I'd walk out to the fields and they were working in the fields, and at one time I walked across the field and another fellow was walking across the field from the other direction, and come to find out he was a fellow I knew in school, and he also was applying for the same position. And at that time we had our interview out there in the field and separately, and I later found out that I was able to get the position of teaching the intermediate grades. And when I say intermediate grades, I taught from the 4th grade through the 7th. But to begin with, it would be like 4th, 5th, 6th, and then it varied over the years. And at one time, the families were large in those years. At one time, I had 38 students in my classroom. And today, that would be much too large a group when you had that many classes, but it seemed that everything went fine, no great problems, and in those days the students, I think, I can't speak because I don't visit schools of today, but I think the students had so much respect for the teachers, and I think the parents had so much respect for the teachers. It helped a great deal in classroom work. And in teaching in Lucca, a teacher was responsible for her students not only for classwork, but for Phi-Ed, for playground, and even in those days, we had what today are track meets, but at that time we called them play day, and we would visit there. Usually we went to Nome, which is about 7 miles from Lucca. In the spring of the year, we would have charge of all the sports activities and track, races, play ball, jumps, and whatever there is today in a track meet. And we had to take our place. We were responsible for certain activities. We'd come home from an all-day play day, and quite often the high school would be having their prom that evening, and everybody attended the prom with a sunburn, red face, and it never failed. That usually happened. If it wasn't sunburn, it was wind.